Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jessica Flynn and I am the owner and maker of Flynn Sisters Boutique, and today we're going to be doing a fun tutorial on what I'm calling like a floral stripe design. So I'm going to show you guys how to do one large vertical stripe of floral pattern, which we're going to mat, and then we'll have some simple stripes going around the other sides. These are some of my favorite peachy olive glitter colors, and she gave me special permission to use her new Glitter Snob logo on this cup. So please don't ask me where I got this SVG. I have special permission to use this logo from Krista with Peachy Olive Glitters. So that's that. But you guys will see the technique and everything just the same if you wanted to put a name on there or your own logo, or whatever the case may be. All of the colors and products and things that you see in this video will of course be listed down in the description box, and we'll have some fun discount codes for you there as well. So that's enough chit chat for me. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, you guys, so first things first, I'm going to trim up my vinyl. You're just going to want to cut off all these white edges that you have on the printed vinyl. If you wanted to use water slide, you definitely could. I just think that printed vinyl is so much easier, especially for this particular kind of design. I'm starting with a fully prepped and sanded cup, and I spray painted it white with a matte white spray paint and primer, the same Rust-Oleum one that I use all the time. I'm using my square combo ruler, and I am going to mark two marks, one at the top and one at the bottom. I'm using the square combo ruler to show me a straight line from top to bottom so I can mark my bottom mark. These marks are going to serve as a guide for the lines I'm going to use for my vinyl section. On this cup, I'm not going to do a whole half section. I'm going to do kind of almost like a third of a section, if you will, because I do want the stripes that I'll be creating with glitter later to show around the front of the cup along either side of the vinyl. You'll see what I mean by that later on in this video. So I'm just marking off about a 3-inch section on the cup, and I'm going to use masking tape to mark out my lines. So you can use electrical tape for this or whatever kind of tape you prefer. All right, and really all we're doing here is masking off the section that will become our patterned vinyl section on the cup. So when you're placing your tape, make sure you're placing it on the outside of the marks that you created. All right, so next we're going to apply our vinyl. One thing I like to do when I'm applying a large section of vinyl like this is to fold back the side that I'm going to be starting on. So I'm going to fold back the transfer paper for the vinyl in a like 1-inch section like this, and that's going to kind of stabilize my straight edge where I'm going to start applying. And I want about a 1/2 inch of overlap with the vinyl onto the tape, and you want to square that up as good as you can. So the vinyl should go on as straight as possible. This will ensure a straight edge along the bottom where, you know, the vinyl meets the bottom of the cup. Don't worry about the overlap on the top. We'll deal with that later. And really, you don't even have to worry about the overlap on the bottom of the cup if you have like a vinyl edging tool or something, or if you just want to trim it off with a knife. I've done this a lot of times, so it's really easy for me to get that straight edge on the bottom of the cup. And when you're applying this, you're just going to want to pull your vinyl as tight as you can and press it down as firmly as you can. And if you find a section where you've got a large wrinkle or a large bubble, you can just pull up and push back down on your vinyl. If you've prepped your cup properly, you should be able to do this multiple times with any type of vinyl, whether it's removable, permanent, or whatever. This particular vinyl I'm using, I think, is a permanent glossy patterned vinyl, and it does great. So I'm also going to use this vinyl scraping tool. It's got a felt edge on it, and it helps me kind of push out and squeegee out the bubbles, if you will, without scratching the print on my vinyl. This particular tool I'm using comes with the transfer tape that I use. I get it on Amazon. You can find these tools all over Amazon. I'll have some links down below if you guys want to grab one. But I just use this to kind of push out the vinyl. If you notice, I leave the backing transfer paper of my vinyl on for as long as possible. You guys don't try to like freeball this and just pull it straight off the transfer sheet and then put it on. You want to leave that transfer sheet on for as long as possible and take your time. Yes, this does take a good amount of time. Yes, it can take some patience, but I promise you it can be done. And I prefer to do this on a straight cup or a skinny cup. I typically won't attempt this on a curved surface just because it's a huge pain in the butt. I have done a modern curve with vinyl and it was not easy, you guys, so just keep that in mind. If you do have some little bubbles here and there, you can use your craft knife to cut a small slit in them and then flatten them out with your vinyl scraper tool thing. Again, it's really important if you're using a vinyl scraper on this pattern vinyl that you use a felt tipped one. That's not going to scrape your vinyl. Next, I'm going to take my craft knife and run it along the edge of my tape lines that I created earlier so I get a nice straight edge on my vinyl. Again, this is something you also want to take your time doing to make sure that you get everything straight. This bottom part here where it kind of puckers up a little bit, if you got it too far around your bottom edge, you just want to push that down as good as you can. Sometimes it helps to use a heat gun. That'll help kind of smooth out some of the wrinkles around that bottom edge. I used a craft knife to trim off the top overlap there, and then we'll just go ahead and remove our masking tape. Then I'm going to use thicker painter's tape to fully mask off my vinyl section that we just created, and now we are going to start the glittered sections. We're only going to do 3 stripes on this particular design, so it was really easy to measure out my sections. I just measured the length of my cup from top to bottom and divided that by 3. In this case, it was like 3 1/16 of an inch, I think. And then I just measured every 3 1/16 of an inch, starting from the top of my cup, which is the easiest place to measure down from. Once I have all my sections marked out, I am just going to use those small marks that I made as a guide to place my tape. And we're going to tape off like 2 sections at a time. If you guys saw my striped video, my glitter stripe video that I did a few months back, this is really similar. So we're just going to tape off the center section first, and then we'll take care of the 2 outer sections. All right, and then once we've got that center section taped off, we are going to mask off one of the 2 sections that are left out with saran wrap, and we're going to paint our top color first with spray paint. If you wanted to hand paint these sections, you certainly could. If you wanted to go straight into glitter, you certainly could. This is just how I prefer to do it. We're going to let that spray paint fully dry, and then I'm going to use the same piece of saran wrap to mark off the painted section on top there, and we're going to paint our bottom section. In this case, I'm using navy blue. You guys, I'm going to have all the spray paint colors and glitter colors listed down in the description box if you want to follow along. Before I spray paint this bottom section, I am going to tape off the bottom of my cup. Because I'm leaving the bottom of my cup white, this is going to make it easier for me to manage the finishing on that later on. So I'm just very carefully taping it off like so, and then we will spray paint that beautiful navy blue color. Next, we're going to remove the masking from our center section and recycle that tape to cover up one of our other sections that we've already done. And then I will mask off the blue section as well, and then we'll go in to paint our center section. To speed up the drying process on this, I recommend a small space heater or even like a blow dryer. You just don't want to get your paint too hot, but it will help to speed this process up a bit. Okay, and once I have those two outer sections masked off, I'm going to spray paint the center section with satin pink. This is a new color. I think it's a new color from Rust-Oleum. I don't know, but it's a really pretty pink. Anyway, once all my paint colors are dry, I'm going to move into my glitter. I'm going to start with the center section first, again masking off the two outer sections with some painter's tape, and I'm going to use epoxy method for my glitter. If you guys don't want to use epoxy method for your glitter, you certainly could use Mod Podge or any other method you prefer. This is just my personal preference. I'm not saying this is the best way or the easiest way. I know I get a lot of flack for taking the hard road on a lot of my designs, but my job is just to show you how I do it. Not the best way, not the easiest way. I just am showing you how I do it. Now, you'll notice when I'm applying the epoxy on this, it looks a little weird. That's because my spray paint was like super chalky and gross. It didn't shake up nicely, and I got some of the paint deposited into my epoxy. Not a big deal. So if you're wondering why that looks so weird, when you're applying your epoxy, you want to apply less than 1 milliliter of epoxy onto your section. I went ahead and mixed just 5 milliliters of epoxy to do this. I didn't use all of it, obviously. For the center color, I'm using Wanderlust from Peachy Olive Glitters. You guys, Wanderlust is so gorgeous. If you don't have this color from Peachy Olive Glitters, you absolutely need it. It's one of my favorite glitter colors of all time. It looks pink, it looks copper, it looks opal. There's just so many gorgeous colors that this glitter flashes, and it's an absolute stunner. So anyway, we're using that for the center color of this design, and you really just want to let it rip. You want to make sure you get immaculate coverage on your first round, because I do not like going back in for second coats. So really pay attention to your coverage, tap off the excess, look at it again, make sure that you haven't missed a spot. And then we're going to remove the tape around the two outer sections, and we're going to let this dry for 2 to 3 hours. If you guys have a fast setting epoxy, this process would obviously be a lot quicker, or if you were using Mod Podge, it would also be quicker. But again, I like to take the long way, so here we are. Alright, so once that center section has dried, I'm going to go ahead and mask it off again using some painter's tape. And you'll want to make sure that you tap off any excess glitter before you mask off this section and move into the outer sections for glittering, because you don't want any of this center color kind of roaming around. So make sure it's fully dry, make sure you've tapped off all the excess and brushed off any excess from around the remainder of the cup. Keep in mind our vinyl section is still masked off, okay? And I'm going to start on the outer sections with my darkest color first. We're going over the navy. Again, I've mixed 5 milliliters of epoxy, and I'm using less than 1 milliliter to cover this blue section first. Sorry, my video is out of frame there, really bad. And I'm using Saltwater from Peachy Olive Glitters. This is a square cut navy blue glitter that is absolutely fabulous. I love this color. So this one is a finer cut glitter. It's going to be a little harder to get really nice coverage on this. So what I like to do is apply a good amount, just fully let it rip. Let the glitter sit for a minute and tap off the excess and really examine if you need to go back over it. You most likely will. I think I ended up pouring glitter over this section 3 different times. I also used a little bit too much epoxy though. So if you guys find you're using a lot of glitter when you're using the epoxy method, you most likely applied too much epoxy. So we're going to go over this coral section in the same way. I'm just applying a very little amount of epoxy, and we're using Seacrest Beach, also from Peachy Olive Glitters. You guys, this is such a classic peachy olive color. It's a beautiful coral pink. Ugh, gorgeous. This is a thicker cut, so I'm not too worried about the coverage. I know it's going to look fabulous. You just want to let it rip, double check your sections, make sure that you've got everything covered. Okay, you guys, and then we are going to let this dry again for 2 to 3 hours. You want to remove that masked off section in the center before you set it down to dry. You do not need to put this on the turner to dry. I just set it on one of my drying racks. And again, you want to just walk away and let this dry for a full 2 to 3 hours. So I forgot to mention, if you want to remove your tape immediately after glittering your sections, you totally can. This is what I'm doing here, okay? So I set it on my rack at this point to dry. After 2 to 3 hours, I came back and I went over the whole surface of the cup with a fine-tooth comb to make sure none of my glitter was out of place. I brushed off any excess, I tapped off any excess, and then I tapped off and brushed off again. You want to really go over this a few times and make sure all of the glitter is where it needs to be. Don't worry about the bottom of your cup looking crazy at this point. We're going to fix that later on. So really aggressively tap off all that excess glitter and make sure you brush off what you can. I would say don't brush too aggressively over your glitter because that can kind of, I just don't like to do that. But clean off that vinyl section as well as you can. And then I'm going to do a very generous coat of Rust-Oleum 2x clear gloss spray. A lot of people ask me if I would use quick coat, urethane sealer, or polyacrylic for this, and my answer is no, because I don't want to drag any of the colors out of their sections while applying that. Next, I'm going to apply a layer of epoxy. I'm going to start applying my epoxy over the vinyl first. This is just so I can make sure that I don't have any like accidental rogue glitter pieces going into my vinyl section. So you definitely want to apply your epoxy in sections, being really careful. I like to turn my turner off and kind of turn it by hand to apply epoxy to cups like this, just to make sure that I'm not dragging epoxy from one section to another all crazy like, okay? So then we're going to let this turn for 4 to 6 hours, and then I'll go immediately into my second coat, and then I'm going to let that second coat dry for 8 to 12 hours, and I will do any kind of necessary sanding that needs to happen before I start my decal process. All right, so my 2 coats of epoxy are dry. I have done all the sanding that I needed to do around my rim and around the sides of the cup to make sure everything is smooth. And I went ahead and taped off the bottom of my cup like so. And then I covered the rest with some saran wrap, and then we're gonna spray paint that bottom section white. Now, the reason why you want to do this after a couple coats of epoxy is so it's nice and smooth and gives a nice finishing touch with the white paint over all of the scratches and stuff. Then I'm going to apply my decals like I normally would. If you'll notice on this decal, I left some parts of it unweeded, and that's because these were super thin, super difficult pieces to weed, and I left the most sensitive parts to be applied onto the cup so that I can weed them on the cup. This is easier for me if you have like super skinny letters and stuff like that. So I just weed out those little sensitive sections, and everything gets transferred nicely, and we're good to go. For the lines on my cup, I'm using white vinyl that I've cut in my Cricut design space. I just used a rectangle shape. I sized it at 11.5 inches by 1/5 inches, and I cut 5 of them. And I'm just going to use those to divide up the sections of the cup like so. You guys have seen me do this before. You just place it along your naturally, the lines that are already naturally there from your design. And then you're going to trim up the excess with your craft knife. Here along the glitter lines where the white vinyl intersects on the side here, you're just gonna overlap it and then trim it on the inside there to make a clean intersection between the two vinyl lines. So see, I just use my knife and get as close as I can and trim that off, and you've got a beautiful seamless look. Okay, so then after all this is done, I'm going to apply my final coats of epoxy, and then we'll come back to mat that center floral section. All right, so after our final coat is absolutely perfect and has had 24 hours to cure, we're going to tape off the section that we want to make matte for the finishing. I'm just using my regular blue painter's tape, and I'm only taping off around the floral section because that is the only part of this cup that I want to have a matte finish. So I'm just very carefully taping off the section here. You want to make sure that you are using nice painter's tape because it needs to withstand the sanding process and water. So pay close attention to that. So once I got everything taped off and pressed down firmly, I'm going to take it over to my sink, and I'm going to be using my final sand from DIYepoxy.com. I'll have a link for this stuff down below. This is just a silica-based non-toxic scouring compound that's going to help us micro scratch the surface of our epoxy, leaving a beautiful matte finish. I'm using a maroon scouring pad at first, and I'm making short, round patterns in my scouring. Notice I'm not making long, hard passes with the scouring pad, but rather short, systematic, round patterns, okay? Because you want everything to be sanded smoothly and evenly, and if you press hard or go in like long, hard strokes like you would sand a cup normally, you're going to get scratches in your coat. Also, you typically want to do this with a white scouring pad, not a maroon one. This is just all I had. Also, I noticed that it took an extremely long time to get the finish I wanted with the maroon scouring pad, so I ended up putting that down, and I went out and got my 00 grade steel wool, which got the job done a lot quicker. Basically what you're going to do is you're just going to continue to scour the surface of your section here and dry it off until you get an even matte finish. Don't stop this process until you're absolutely certain, once it dries, that you've got everything, scoured evenly and it's all like a perfect matte finish. If you find scratches in it, if you find shiny spots, you want to just go through and do it again. Even if it looks nice when it dries, I would advise doing it just one more time. All in all, it should take a solid 10 minutes. That's how long it took me to do this section. Again, I think you can get the job done sooner with this 00 grade steel wool versus the scouring pads. I've never used a white scouring pad though, so I'm not sure about that one. I just know from my personal experience with what I've got here, 00 grade steel wool is my favorite to use. So again, if you guys are seeing like weird scratches or things in your finish, you just keep going, go through again, okay, until it turns out perfect. Then I'm just going to remove my tape, and that is it. There is no sealing that has to happen. You don't need to put another layer of epoxy over it. This is it. So you have your beautiful matte floral section against the contrast of that beautiful glittered stripe section. And I absolutely love this look. There's something about matte floral that just gets me in the feels. I love how this cup turned out. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I will see you on Wednesday. If you love this video, you could check out our last video here. Also be sure to find us on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and of course subscribe for all our new videos that come out every Wednesday and Saturday. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon.